Hey guys, it's Sagar from TecworkZ, and in this video, we are going to take a very detailed look at the cameras on this POCO X2. I have over 80 image and video samples in various lighting conditions, so make sure you watch the complete video. I also wanted to include the Gcam samples from the POCO X2 in this video, but even without those samples, this video was getting a lot longer, so I decided to make a separate video about it, and that one will go live a day after this one. Let us quickly get the specifications out of the way. There is a quad camera setup at the back. Primary camera gets the 64 megapixel Sony IMX686 sensor with f1.9 aperture and 26mm lens. Next camera gets a 8 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture, and this sensor is coupled with a 13mm ultra-wide angle lens. Then there is a 2 megapixel macro camera with f2.4 aperture, and finally there is another 2 megapixel depth sensor with f2.4 aperture. At the front, we now get two cameras. Main camera gets a 20 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture and a 27mm lens. Second camera gets a 2 megapixel depth sensor with f2.4 aperture. I think if companies are including two cameras at the front, second one should always be a wide lens. Because even on phones without the depth sensor, edge detection is pretty good when it comes to portrait selfies. In the camera app, you do get a pro mode which lets you adjust all the settings like white balance, focus, shutter speed, ISO and exposure. You can also switch between different lenses, turn on focus peaking, take 64 megapixel images and even take raw images from this pro mode. For the primary camera, range for shutter speed is from 1000th of a second all the way up to 32 seconds, and range for ISO is from 100 to 3200. Now before we get to the image and video samples, if you are new to this channel, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. That way, you won't miss out on any of the amazing videos coming up on this channel. As always, we start with daylight images. The 64 megapixel Sony IMX686 sensor captures incredible details when we have plenty of light around. Now these are 16 megapixel images, since in the normal mode, this phone uses pixel binning to combine information from 4 pixels into 1 pixel, giving us more details in each shot. These images are sharp and there is no shortage of detail even when we zoom in on any part. There also seems to be a good amount of contrast in these images. As with the POCO F1 when it was launched, and with most of the Redmi phones, there is a slight green tint in these images. You can easily fix it in editing, so I won't worry too much about it. And with the POCO F1, Xiaomi eventually fixed it with a software update, so we should not worry too much about it. Overall colors are nice and naturally saturated from the POCO X2. Images don't look overly processed, and as I just mentioned, colors are nice and balanced. If you want more punchy looking colors, you can turn on the AI scene detection mode, and that will add a bit of more contrast and saturation to your images. I like to keep the AI scene detection turned off for all of my shots. What I like to keep on is the auto HDR mode. POCO X2 is intelligent enough to know when it needs to turn the HDR mode on by itself. You can see there is a difference in the images shot with and without the HDR mode. With this mode turned on, there are more details in the darker parts, and you can even see more details being preserved in the brighter areas of the images. We can see the same in this next set of images. The HDR mode does help in bringing more details out of the darker or shadowed areas while also preserving the details in the brighter areas. So to get the best images out of your phone, I would suggest you to leave the HDR mode on auto all the time. In some of the images like this, the difference that the HDR mode makes is amazing. If you want to take high resolution images, you can switch to the 64 megapixel mode. These images capture a lot of information, so they are 3 to 4 times larger in terms of file size, which means if you leave this mode on all the time, your phone's internal storage will fill up pretty fast. Let us compare these 64 megapixel images with the 16 megapixel ones. Looking at them from this distance, you can barely differentiate between the two. You will have to zoom way in to see the difference, and only then can you notice that the 64 megapixel images have a slight edge in terms of the detail levels. I'm sure most of you don't zoom in so deep or even compare these images side by side like this in real life. So I would suggest you to stick with the default 16 megapixel mode for all of your shots. It also gives you a much better dynamic range, as the HDR mode cannot be used while taking 64 megapixel images. This is an image shot with the primary camera, and here is the same image shot with the 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera. Look at how much more of the scene this 13mm ultra-wide angle lens lets you get in your shot. This lens is especially useful when you want to show the scale of things, or when you want to show more of the scene in your shot, but you don't have enough space to physically move away from your subject. There is also 2x mode in the camera app, but we don't have a 2x telephoto lens on this phone, So what this mode does is just crops in on the images captured with the primary camera. Now this 8 megapixel wide camera is not as good as the primary one. So these wide images are not as sharp or as detailed as the images from the main camera. But nevertheless, it is always good to have multiple focal lengths on your phone as it helps you tell stories in different ways. If we look back at these images side by side, you can see a clear difference in the white balance and color temperature between these two lenses. You can easily fix this if you know how to edit your images later on, but for most people who don't edit their images, I think POCO should try and fix this thing in the camera software itself. Hopefully they acknowledge and fix it in one of the future software updates. Before we move on to the close-up shots, here's a quick focusing speed test. POCO X2 is quick at switching the focus from near to far object, but the shift in focus is a bit abrupt and not very smooth. This is not an issue while clicking images, but if you're shooting videos, it is clearly visible. This quick and accurate focusing is very important when we are trying to take close-up shots. Since the POCO X2 is quick at focusing on a nearby object, these close-up shots turned out to be really amazing. You can see that the subject is in perfect sharp focus, and since we have got a very wide f1.9 aperture on this main camera, you can see that the background gets a very nice and natural optical blur. If you want to get even closer to your subject, the POCO X2 comes with a dedicated macro lens. It lets you get much closer to the subject and still allows you to set the focus so you can get amazing macro shots like this. It is so much fun to take these shots. Since it is just a 2 megapixel sensor with f2.4 aperture, we see a lot of noise in some of these shots. To avoid this noise, make sure that you are taking these macro shots in areas where there is plenty of light. The best results can be found while shooting outside on a bright sunny day. Coming to my favorite kind of shots, the portraits. Portrait mode on smartphones is the easiest way to give your images a professional look, as it mimics the kind of images you might get when you're using an interchangeable lens camera and an expensive prime lens. I've always felt that Xiaomi, Redmi, and now even POCO have got very good at isolating the subject from its background for these portrait shots. The edge detection is near perfect and the background is blurred out very nice and evenly. You can even change the amount of blur to the background or add various studio lighting effects to your portrait shots before or even after you have clicked them. There is a new movie mode within the portrait mode which lets you take 21:9 images with black bars at the top and bottom. It gives your portrait shots a very nice cinematic look. I like this mode very much, and for the top and bottom bars, you can either let them be as they are or just crop them out in editing. You can take portrait mode images of objects as well. When the object has very complex edges, it just keeps the part that you tapped on in focus and then gradually blurs the rest of the image like we see in this example. When it actually detects the edges like in this shot, you can see how well it separates the subject from rest of the background. I feel this and some other phones from Redmi handle these portrait shots of objects in a much better way compared to most of the other smartphones. And yes, you can use the movie mode while taking portraits of objects as well to add in a bit more drama to these portrait shots. Now let us get to the images shot in indoors, artificial and lower lighting conditions. When you are shooting in these kind of lighting conditions, just make sure that you are not in the 64 megapixel mode. Since that mode does not use pixel binning, there is a lot of noise in those images compared to the 16 megapixel ones. With that said, I think the low light performance of this phone is pretty good. There is enough sharpness so you can make out the edges of everything, and even if you zoom in, you can read the small text in the images. Now this low light performance is not groundbreakingly great for the price, but if you know how to use the camera and have realistic expectations, you can get some really good looking images in lower light. Since the sensor is not optically stabilized, you will see a lot of noise as we start shooting in even darker situations. To make up for this, you can switch to the night mode. And right from the first set of images, you can see that the image with the night mode has better details and colors in it. I like that night mode images on this phone don't take too long to capture. This way, you don't have to hold the phone steady for 4 or 5 seconds to get a good shot. These night mode images handle the exposure from light in a much better way, making the overall shot look very pleasing. It not only adds more light to the shot, but also elevates the colors, making the night mode images look much richer. Whenever you find yourself in less than ideal lighting conditions, make sure to switch to the night mode so you will get the best possible results from your POCO X2. That brings us to the front-facing cameras. The 20 megapixel selfie camera can take some good looking selfies, but I think even with the beauty mode turned off, this phone is applying some amount of smoothing to my skin in all of these shots. And one big point is, whenever you switch to the selfie camera, by default, the beauty mode is turned on. If you don't wish to use it, you will have to turn it off manually every time you switch to this camera, which is a bit annoying. Thanks to the secondary depth sensor, edge detection is fairly accurate in these portrait selfies. Since the background is blurred out, portrait selfies appear to be a bit sharper than the normal selfies. The dynamic range does take a big hit while taking these portrait selfies. As you can see, the bright background is completely blown out in all of these portrait selfies. Now these selfie cameras are not the best when it comes to lower light. There is less detail and lot of noise in these selfies when the light goes down. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the POCO X2. You can see how it is handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure, and from the looks of it, there doesn't seem to be any kind of stabilization for this video. With high noise levels in lower light, a bit of over softening of the images, and no electronic stabilization while shooting videos, I am not too impressed with the selfie cameras on this phone. Coming to the video performance of the rear camera. You can shoot electronically stabilized 4K videos at up to 30 fps, and these videos look really good. Here are some 4K 30 fps clips that I shot with the POCO X2. You also get to shoot 1080p 60 fps videos, but at this frame rate, you don't get any kind of stabilization. You can shoot 120 fps slow motion videos at up to 1080p resolution. And if you want to go crazy with the frame rate, there is also an option to shoot 960 fps super slow motion videos but at 720p resolution. I am not a big fan of these low bitrate, low resolution, high frame rate videos, so I stick to shooting slow motion videos in 1080p resolution. After looking at over 80 image and video samples, I am really impressed with the rear cameras on this POCO X2. It captures very detailed images with accurate colors when there is ample of light. And even as the light goes down, the night mode helps it get good looking usable images. Personally, I am a big fan of portrait mode photography, and recently I have found a liking for macro photography as well. So I am glad to have this phone perform amazingly well in both these modes. At a starting price of 15,999 rupees, I think the POCO X2 is the new camera champion in the under 20,000 rupees smartphone world. Now these have been my thoughts about this camera. After looking at all these image and video samples, what do you guys think about the cameras on this phone? Do let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.